Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I've got a full tank review for you on a Tier 9 Chinese tank destroyer. It is the WZ-111G FT. This vehicle is a Tier 9 tank destroyer with a Tier 10 tank destroyer gun. And when you combine this with 200mm of upper hull armor and 1,800 hit points giving the durability it needs to get the job done, this has quickly become one of my favorite go-to Tier 9 tanks for when you just wanna deal with whatever's in front of you. So stick around as I let you know everything there is to know about the WZ-111G FT by firstly comparing its statistics to other Tier 9 tank destroyers and following it up with some Ace Tanker gameplay. So without further ado, let's get stuck in. So obviously, the two big competitors for this tank are the Object 704, the Tier 9 Soviet tank destroyer and one of the oldest vehicles in the game, and additionally, another one of the oldest vehicles in the game, the Tier 9 German tank destroyer, the Jagdtiger. So immediately, what makes the WZ-111G FT special is the fact that its 152mm main armament, a lot like that on the Object 704, is just a cut above. Now you might look at the penetration values and think, well, that's not really a big step up 4mm, but look what happens if you dab the 2 key in this tank and load heat compared to the Object 704. You have 395mm of penetration compared to 329. And that just allows you to blast your way through some of the thickest armor in the game, irrelevant of the distance. But it's just not the premium rounds on this tank that are special, because obviously it's a Tier 10 gun at Tier 9. Check out these high explosive rounds, dealing a whopping 1,100 damage with 90mm of penetration, much better than that on the Object 704 at 950. However, unfortunately, while you're going to be hitting really hard with 750 alpha damage, your rate of fire is just a touch worse than the Object 704, firing 3 1/3 rounds a minute compared to the 3.5 that the Object 704 is capable of. And this DPM disparity is further made worse when we compare the tank to the Jagdtiger, which is nearly packing 3,000 DPM. As well, its alpha damage is worse. At 560, it fires nearly 2 extra rounds a minute. One thing, however, that certainly isn't welcome about having a Tier 10 gun at Tier 9 on the 111G is that the shell velocity is abysmal at 760 meters per second with its armor piercing and its heat rounds, which makes it very tricky to loop those shells in against fast moving targets at mid to long ranges. And just look what the Jagdtiger shell velocity is, and that's on its standard rounds. What happens if you fire APCR in the Jagdtiger? 1,500. Wow, that truly is an absolute sniper. So moving on to gun handling, and this is where I feel the tank shines compared to the Object 704. Its aim time is 2.5 seconds. That's great for a big caliber gun. It's only slightly worse than the Jagdtiger, and remember, you are packing 152mm instead of 128. So that 0.4 second advantage that the 111G has over the Object 704 is very welcome, and furthermore, it has the same dispersion values when moving and slightly better when you're just turning the gun. And I personally found that this combination of great penetration and pretty darn good gun handling means that you can snapshot in the 111G far more reliably than you could do in the 704. In addition to this, the vehicle has a pretty nice gun traverse, 12 degrees to the left and 12 degrees to the right, slightly better than the 704 and the Jagdtiger. So now on to mobility, and it's not good news for the 111G. It's slower than the Object 704 forwards and even slower than the Jagdtiger, and while its power to weight ratio is slightly better than the Jagdtiger, it's significantly worse than the Object 704, and just take a look at the ground resistances, much worse than the 704 and the Jagdtiger in this comparison. But once again, this tank is just absolutely bizarre. While it's not too fast forwards at 35 kilometers and its power to weight is thoroughly mediocre, look at its reverse speed, 16 kilometers an hour, significantly better than the 704 and the Jagdtiger, which can be very useful for when you need to pull back round a corner quickly, or alternatively if you just want to stop somebody from being able to flank you and get your fairly weak side armor. In addition to this, Wargaming have given the vehicle a pretty decent track traverse of 25 degrees a second, which means that even though it's got a worse power to weight and ground resistances, it actually turns a little bit faster than the 704. But don't confuse a little bit faster with great. This tank still takes a long time to turn around, especially on soft terrain. So if you're trying to deal with one of these tanks, don't be afraid to go all in to try and get the Psy. Just try to do so before it gets that 152mm Tier 10 gun towards you. So now on to armor, and this is where the tank is excellent. 200mm at the front of the vehicle. Much better than the Object 704, but it looks like it's worse than the Jagdtiger. However, this is only on paper. And this is while the Jagdtiger undoubtedly has a really strong superstructure with 250mm of armor, it is completely flat, and so it never really gets better than 260. However, the 111G, it's very well angled, as we can see here, so even though it's 200mm, it's just as effective. But of course, the Jagdtiger has this awful kind of upper hull here that only has 200mm of effective armor because the impact impact thickness is 150 millimeters, whereas the 111G doesn't really have this mid plate and it's only the lower plate that is vulnerable. And as we can see here, because the Jagdtiger is just so much taller, that lower plate is actually pretty much just as high on both tanks, and equally just as weak at about 185 millimeters effective. Furthermore, the 111G absolutely destroys the Object 704 frontally as well. The front plate is pretty much just as well angled. While this is packing 200 millimeters, the 704 is only packing 120. And so when we compare how likely it is for a Type 61 using standard ammunition to get through the front of both of these tanks, we can see that it's going through the Object 704 pretty much every single time if it can avoid shooting the mantlet. And for the 111G, it's now about a 50-50 chance. And this gets much better if you use the 6 degrees of gun depression. This tank, now a tier 9 medium tank, only has about a 13 to 1 in 4 chance of being able to get through the front of the tank, whereas for the Object 704, it's like an 85% chance. And so this means for the 111G, if you can hide your lower plate frontally, you are an absolute beast. And don't be afraid to angle just a touch, but the problem is that as we can see, the side plate on this tank, while it's designed to ricochet shells that hit the vehicle from the front, as soon as you over angle it, it becomes a massive weak point on the side. And so only angle a little bit in the 111G, or you're going to expose your side armor and lose all of your hit points. A passing mention must be made, however, to the side armor of the Object 704. Do you see how it's angled all along here, a lot like on an IS-7, designed to catch shots that hit the mid part of the vehicle? That's a luxury that the 111G just doesn't have at all. And with only 80 millimeters of side armor and a big old profile, do not get flanked in this tank, otherwise you're going to be having just a bad day, as a Jagdtiger is having. In addition to this strong frontal armor, the 111G has a big old slug of hit points, 1,800 to be exact, and this is just a gigantic upgrade over the tier 8, which has 1,000 hit points exactly. It just blows my mind that the difference between a tier 8 tank destroyer and a tier 9 tank destroyer can be 80%. And this gives the vehicle a definitive advantage over the Object 704, which has 1,600 hit points and only goes up from 1,200 with the ISU 152. And finally, the 111G also has an advantage over the 704 in the form of view range, 380 meters base compared to 360. This is the difference between working well with coated optics if you have good crew skills and definitely needing binoculars. And so if any of you have exceptionally skilled 111G crews out there and you're going to have recon, situational awareness, brothers in arms, and maybe you even want to use a premium consumable, you will get very good view range with coated optics on this tank, which will forego the need for that awkward setup. But you know what? I think that's quite enough theory crafting. Let's put it to the test on the battlefield. So here we go, we're rolling out on Paris in a nice matchup, and of course the kind of matchup that you get in this vehicle changes the way it's going to play. In a matchup like this, its armor is just so much more effective. Half of the enemy team won't be able to penetrate my upper hull, even with premium rounds if I hide my lower plate. Then there's about 3 or 4 tanks on the enemy team that maybe have a 50-50 chance if they fire premiums to go through my upper plate, and then the top tier tanks, well, they're going to be going through 50% of the time with standard rounds, and if they fire premium, well, but I just don't really want to get hit by premium to hit like 330 heat rounds from a T10. Now, if you get yourself into a bad matchup in this tank, you want to play more of that kind of ambush role. You don't want to expose yourself as much. However, because I am top tier here, I'm thinking, let's go right down the middle. If I do get caught out, it's not really the end of the world. I should be able to use the excellent reverse speed on this tank, 16 kilometers an hour, to be able to get back into cover or just get out of harm's way. Well, I guess one of those things kind of is the other when you think about it. So immediately, big old hit into the Jagdtiger 88. That poor guy. It's really weird to have a tier 10 tank destroyer gun and to be firing it at tier 8 tank destroyers with preferential matchmaking like that Jagdtiger 88. Now I'd press my F3 key here on the T28, asking him to perhaps pull back so he doesn't get tracked in the open by the Tiger 1. Then maybe I'll be able to give him a little bit of help as well, and there you go. Good teamwork there, thanks to the T28 for pulling back, and I'm able to cover his flank and get the Tiger away from him. So, good stuff there. I hope that T28 actually listened to what I said. Good use of communications there rather than just like spamming in chat, get out the way, noob. But unfortunately it didn't look like it worked out too well for him, as the Stridsvagn 103B manages to finish him off. Now the Stridsvagn 103B, that tier 9 Swedish tank destroyer, has 40 millimeters of very well angled armor, but when you are packing a 152 millimeter gun, you are going to be able to overmatch with standard ammunition. So I can hit that tank anywhere, and as long as I hit the hull armor, even if it's well angled, I'm easily going to be able to go through it. So there you go, 103. Oh, not bouncing us at all there. And in fact, he puts a round into the Tiger too. Now I get spotted, start reversing, think about shooting at that Tiger. He doesn't come around the corner. And you can see that this vehicle just seems to pick up damage quickly, right, ladies and gentlemen? Sure, it hasn't got the best DPM for a Tier 9 tank destroyer at 2,500, but have we ever really needed that full rate of fire on this tank so far? It's not really going to stop us from having a good round, and whether it's going to be a great round or not, we're going to have to see. Now I've decided, considering my team are pushing their way through the center, I feel like I'd rather pull back. I don't think that Stridsvagn 1030 is going to come out. I believe he's going to wait for the, for me, I was thinking, to be able to push through here, and he wants to get some cross shots from this location. It'd be hard to dig him out because he can fire, pull back, he's going to be able to pen me. I decide to fire blind there where I think the AMX M445 is, and because I don't get spotted, my sixth sense doesn't go off. I feel like I can be more aggressive now, and especially so considering my team are pushing the center of the map and the enemies seem like they may be going to be winning the south here. So I want to push forwards, and you can see I want to try and get into some cover because I can use these stairs and the railings, I guess, or the supports to the left or to the right of the staircase to be able to hide my lower plate. And of course the GW Panther might be able to hit me a little bit, but when you got pretty decent armor and a big old slug of hit points, I can take a lot of shots. Now, that's the complete different playstyle. When I was in the Tier 8 Chinese tank destroyer with 1,000 hit points and much weaker hull armor, playing aggressively was almost out of the question. It was such a painful tank for me to play. It was almost just like a bad Ferdinand, and that's saying a lot. Ferdinand without the hit points, playing the Tier 8 Chinese TD. When I managed to get into this tank, well, sure, sometimes these big guns can be a little bit frustrating. When it goes well, it does go well. So what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to keep my armor towards the AMX M4, and I was using the WZ-121 there to cover me from the back. Now I want to try and get into the front, try and get in front of him, and maybe I can get a shot into this T29 here. Oh, juicy. Will we roll high enough? Oh, no, we leave him on 32 hit points, but it was just an above average roll. So now I see an SU-12244 who's going to flank me. It doesn't matter if he's Tier 7. He's got a great rate of fire on that tank, amazing DPM, 7.5 rounds a minute with 390 alpha. I have to turn around and deal with him because my rear armor is not good enough, but my frontal armor is good enough to bounce him. I bounced the AMX M4 frontally, the Jagdtiger 88 and the AMX 65T put rounds into my back though. But again, this is where having those hit points, it's not such a big deal. If I was in the Tier 8, I'd be a one-shot now, but I'm not. So I'm still feel quite happy in this game. I think it could have gone better, but hopefully we can try and make a comeback, possibly. 4,200 damage here. Not a bad result for any Tier 9 tank destroyer. And still with over half of my hit points left, I can hopefully pick up a little bit more. Now this AMX M4, he's digging in. I know I'm going to be flanked. And in these kind of scenarios, you can't sit back and leave it up to RNG. With 0.4 accuracy, I've already missed one shot sniping in. Now I think, shall I shoot the artillery? And I figure out if I turn for the artillery, then the AMX might track me. And if he tracks me again, then I'm dead. So I'm just going to take my chances. I go over, and I had probably a millisecond there to shoot his side. And this is where the bad track traverse comes into play. But I pull back. I use my reverse speed to be able to avoid getting shot in the side there. He bounces off my frontal hull armor, and it's good night AMX M445. Now I reverse, try and make it hard for the artillery to hit me, and my artillery actually puts in a good shot there. Thank you so much, Lorraine 15550. You saved me from a little bit more damage there. And now I'm going to try and get this big old Chinese 152mm to bear on this French heavy tanker. Boom! Right through the hull armor. Terrible hull armor on that 65. Isn't going to be bouncing that any day of the week. And that's a big old hit, 770 damage. Now he gets finished off by the Tiger 2. I don't think he expected to lose his hit points that quickly. But we're going to have to do something quickly here if we want to try and stop them from taking the cap circle. So yeah, well, you've got to take your chances, right? We blind fire a Tiger. His play was a little bit obvious. I pinged the cap circle a couple of times to let the Tiger 2 know how important it is. And this is where I guess the rate of fire on this tank is a little bit disappointing. I might have been able to make my way into position a little bit faster there if I'd been in a 704, had that power to weight ratio up the slope, had the rate of fire to be able to get him quicker. I ping the map again. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just hoping that the Tiger 2 is going to make his way around over there, because if the Tiger 2 makes his way around this location, as you see I'm pinging the map to try and communicate with him that all he has to do is to slinky here to be able to get the interrupt, but oh no, he's coming this way. Maybe the Tiger 2 doesn't see that the cap circle is being taken. Maybe the Tiger 2 just doesn't give a darn and he wants to get one more kill. Well, unfortunately, the Tiger II isn't going to be picking up the kill because I confirm it, and there's no way we're going to be able to get to the cap circle here. So it was a bit of a heartbreaking moment here. Maybe a little bit frustrated by the Tiger II there. Well, I'm not going to TK him, but at least I hope I'm not now. I just had a little bit of a look at him, and I was probably like, during that moment. Nevertheless, 5 kills, 6,600 damage, and not in a long time, less than 7.5 minutes to pick up that much damage is very good for a tier 9 vehicle, irrelevant of it being in a strong matchup. And this pretty much showcased everything that I wanted to about the 111G. If you hide your lower plate, you got good frontal hull armor. I love the reverse speed on this tank. I love having that full-blooded tier 10 tank destroyer gun. Although I didn't fire a single heat round in this game because obviously the matchup was really good. When you do fire heat rounds against those tier 10 E100s, those mouse, they can probably get very, very frustrated with your 395 millimeters of heat penetration. And because the shells aren't really even that expensive, if you penetrate into 750 alpha, it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg to use them. And furthermore, the high explosive rounds on this tank, once again, not used in this replay. You're just going to have to trust me that when you do hit 1,100 damage into your opponents, especially into a Scorpion G with 90 millimeters of penetration, it is oh so sweet. Yeah, just like this. Not bad, not bad. And so while this was a defeat on Christmas Eve for the 111G, we still pick up an ace tanker, as this was 857 base experience points. And remember, because we got a hero medal in the form of a high caliber, we get courageous resistance, and so we get 745 bonus experience, meaning that if this had been a victory, it would have been 1,354 base experience points. So we pick up a steel wall medal for blocking 2,000 damage, 13 hits received. Not the best steel wall, but we still had a lot of our hit points left over that we could have used to carry this game, and the high caliber for 7,000 damage dealt because we did blind fire that Tiger. And because we didn't fire any premium rounds with the courageous resistance bonus, we end up making a very decent profit as well. And so it's games like these why I've been really enjoying the WZ-111G FT, and it feels like a breath of fresh air after the misery that was the tier 7 and the tier 8 Chinese tank destroyers. We've been doing decent average damage per game, or 3,200 in a tier 9 TD, but that's great. And while it's still a small numbers problem, I've only played 30 games in the tank, I'm getting 77% wins playing it completely solo. I do feel like I'm being influential in the vehicle. Far more so than I felt in the tier 8 Chinese tank destroyer, but is it worth the grind to get there? Well, I don't think that's the case. I just think that the Object 704 is pretty much as good as this vehicle. And so if you've already got the Object 704, I could never recommend you to grind through all the lower tier Chinese tank destroyers, although they're not the worst thing in the world. Their playstyle, at least for me, just wasn't enjoyable, purely to be able to get the 111G. And you know what? I think I realize why I enjoy this tank now, ladies and gentlemen. I think I enjoy this tank because, frankly, it is just a Fat-ISU 152 at tier 9 with a tier 10 tank destroyer gun. And considering that Wargaming have recently borderline nerfed the ISU 152, maybe that's why I've been enjoying the 111G so much. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for today's tank review. I hope you enjoyed this video, or maybe it was just useful to you. If it was, please consider giving it a like. I'd really appreciate it. But if you absolutely hated the video, give it a thumbs down. And let me know what you think about the 111G FT. Do you think that the reason why I like this tank is because it basically is a Fat-ISU 152 at tier 9? And do you even think that there's a reason to jump up to tier 9 when you could just play the ISU 152 at tier 8 and then you do have those filthy one-shots on tier 6s? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.